I have a very successful mail order business, and I'm promoting bodybuilding competitions. Through bodybuilding, I did a lot of things, I got into the films. I did 3 films so far.
Maybe 3.5 hours a week in the gym of actual weight training. Not only have I got the genetics for the sport, I'm also training efficiently.
This is truly the greatest bodybuilding show on earth. Nothing against Olympia.
So I kind of overtrained, but at the same time my body still responded, because if I saw any leg equipment in there, I would do every leg machine, every chest machine, every shoulder machine.
Number 12, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger is bodybuilding. The 7-time Mr. Olympia winner helped bring the sport into the mainstream back in the 1970s, and he's still the standard that nearly every champion has to live up to today. But before he was winning Mr. Olympia titles, the Austrian Oak was a teenage powerlifter with worlds of potential. Before Schwarzenegger took his iconic physique to the global stage, he competed in both powerlifting and Olympic-style weightlifting meets in his late teens and early 20s. His first competition took place inside a Graz, Austria beer hall in 1963 at 15 years old. He initially hit a 150-pound 2-arm press, which he described as his typical weight for the move at the time. He followed that up with 185 pounds on his next attempt, aided by the energy of the crowd. It was only a matter of time before he took his talent to the local competition, and Schwarzenegger's powerlifting debut in 1966 didn't disappoint. Schwarzenegger's lifts in the 80 kg plus class included a 165 kg bench press, 250 kg deadlift, and 170 kg squat, which made a total of 585 kg. That total earned him a first-place finish, but all that strength came at a cost. By that point, Schwarzenegger weighed over 250 pounds, and while he achieved the powerful look he craved, not all of it was muscle. He returned to the platform in 1967. His last hurrah was a first-place finish in the same competition in 1968, highlighted by a 310-kilogram deadlift. He was 20 years old at the time, but it was all bodybuilding from then on. He had already won the Mr. Universe at this point, and his first Mr. Olympia title in 1970 was right around the corner. Schwarzenegger topped out at a 485-pound bench press, a 550-pound squat, and a 710-pound deadlift during his career. From then onwards, this physical demigod switched to bodybuilding and continued his meteoric rise on the world stage.
I feel that you can have the best product in the world, and if you don't have anybody who can sell it for you or tell the public, but if you don't know how to sell it, it's a waste of time, the whole thing. Oh yeah, I'm pumped up already. A bodybuilder looks at his body as a thing. Am I married? No, I'm not married. Why?
Consider coming up against Muhammad Ali.
Question is if he would do it. And he wants to develop this thing, and that's what he's looking at, but never at himself. I have a very successful mail order business, and I'm promoting bodybuilding competitions. Through bodybuilding, I did a lot of things, I got into the films. I did 3 films so far.
Number 11, Hadi Choopan. Crowned Mr. Olympia in 2022, Hadi Choopan is a bodybuilder with an exceptional physique. Nicknamed the Persian Wolf, this small man of 1.67 m dethroned the legendary Big Ramy after a fierce competition. Hadi Choopan developed an early passion for the physical culture at the age of 13. After a few participations in local competitions of bodybuilding in which he shone, he won his first national title in 2005. He was only 18 years old and weighed only 68 kg, but he was already beginning to attract the attention of observers. The Iranian bodybuilder won 5 other national medals, launching his career as a professional bodybuilder. He won the WBPF Asian Championship in 2013, and then the World Championship the same year. He retained his WBPF World title in 2014 and in 2015. In 2018, Hadi Choopan finished first in the category 212 at the IFBB Portugal Pro, a qualifying event for the prestigious Mr. Olympia competition. He was allowed to enter the US to compete in Mr. Olympia 2019 and surprised everyone by competing in Open the Queen category. His exceptional physique allowed him to finish on the 3rd step of the podium. Hadi Choopan finished 4th in 2020 and 3rd again in 2021. He went on to the Mr. Olympia 2022 more motivated than ever, which he won once again. Hadi Choopan's progression over the years has been impressive, and his Mr. Olympia 2022 title is the culmination of thousands of hours of training. The question is, will he be able to repeat his feat in 2023? The competition will be tough, but the Persian Wolf will be one of the great favorites to succeed himself. Number 10, Franco Columbu. Franco Columbu, who passed away August 30, 2019 at 78, was a man of many titles. He was Mr. Olympia twice, 1976 and 81, Mr. Universe, Mr. World, Mr. International, Mr. Europe. He was a husband, a father, a chiropractor, an actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger's best friend. But perhaps most famously, he was celebrated for his strength. At only 5'5" and 180-something, his lifts are legendary. After boxing in his native Sardinia, Franco Columbu took up Olympic weightlifting in the early 60s. He was rumored to have had these bests: press 325 pounds, snatch 270 pounds, clean and jerk 400 pounds. If done in one meet, they'd total 995 pounds, and that's ludicrous. He would have been at most a middleweight, and the middleweight gold medalist of the 1964 Olympics set a world record with 981. He competed in powerlifting, a new sport finding its way in the 60s with vague rules and odd lifts. His first verified contest was in 1965. He competed twice more that year and once in 1966. Then, at 26, at the 1967 German Championships, he set 3 German records for his weight class. Speaking of odd lifts, in the summer of 1977, when Franco Columbu was the reigning Mr. Olympia, he competed in the first World Strongman. Easily the smallest competitor at 5'5" and 182, he tied for second in some events. His greatest claimed lifts were a 525-pound bench press, 655-pound squat, 750-pound deadlift. Interestingly, though, on the 1977 WSM telecast, his claims were 475, 655, and 735. Columbu won the Mr. Olympia twice, if controversially the second time. Let it be known, a 5'5", 180-ish giant once walked among us. Number 9, Frank Zane. Zane had a physique IFBB judges loved, women admired, and men aspired to emulate. As important as they are in terms of bodybuilding history, Frank Zane's 3 Mr. Olympia wins, 1977 to 79, probably don't mean as much to the majority of people as does his unofficial title, Bodybuilder You'd Most Want to Look Like. Frank Zane's physique was a result of both light and heavy training. Early in his career, when leanness was his main calling card, his training consisted of light weights and high reps. This approach was effective. He looked phenomenal and won his share of bodybuilding titles, but the Mr. Olympia crown eluded him. What he lacked was the muscular size that could only be achieved by training with heavy weight. In 1977, when he began to up his poundages in preparation for that year's Olympia, it worked. His lifting during that time consisted of 3 to 4 exercises and 3 sets each for most body parts, a lower volume than what he was accustomed to. Most sets resided in the 8 to 12 rep range. As a result, he added considerable size to his physique and won his first of 3 consecutive Olympia titles. Unfortunately, Zane's wariness of heavy training was eventually justified, as his shoulders, knees, and lower back all suffered. Number 8, Ronnie Coleman. The King wowed bodybuilding fans with his jaw-dropping deadlifts and squats. 8-time Mr. Olympia Ronnie Coleman was one of the most powerful bodybuilders of the 90s and 2000s. Coleman was a bodybuilder who legitimately hoisted plates like a powerlifter. He built upon the high-intensity training style employed by Dorian Yates and ratcheted the weights even higher, hitting max lifts on the deadlift and squat that most couldn't compete with. If Ronnie Coleman's training style is reminiscent of a powerlifter's routine, it's because he actually dabbled in powerlifting competitions during his early days as a bodybuilder. A young Coleman competed in a handful of deadlift-only meets in his native Texas in the early 90s, and his physique responded incredibly well to the training regimen. The reigning deadlift champ at USFP for 4 years straight from 1991 to 1994. His deadlift average was 727.5, justifying his reputation as a weightlifting beast. Ronnie Coleman became famous as a renowned powerlifter and bodybuilder who lifted the heaviest weight possible. He went on to win the Mr. Olympia title for 8 consecutive years, and is widely regarded as either the greatest bodybuilder of all time or one of the 2 greatest along with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Going on to win 26 IFBB professional titles, he is also renowned for his combination of size and conditioning, dominant body parts, and extreme heavy workouts, making him the strongest bodybuilder of all time.
Yeah, buddy. Yo. Yeah, buddy. Y'all know how we do it. Want to give it up to Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the guys to let y'all know that bodybuilding is not an individual sport. It was not like dieting because that food was awesome. This is truly the greatest bodybuilding show on earth. Nothing against the Olympia. Mama, we got us a Lifetime Achievement Award. Thank you.
Number 7. Jay Cutler. Very few could hold their own against this mass monster. What Cutler might have given up to a few other competitors in aesthetics, he more than made up for with sheer mass and a seeming yardstick's measure of width through his shoulders. Cutler's physique literally crowded other competitors off the stage, and it certainly didn't come by chance. His go-to training methods involved some pretty mobster-sized weights, and his physique reflected that. And he started it all at the ripe young age of 19, when he won the heavyweight class at the NPC Teen Nationals in 1993. Though Branch Warren took home the light heavies and the overall 3 years later, Jay took his pro card on his first attempt at the 1996 NPC Nationals. Deadlifts was an intrinsic part of his workout routine. Jay was strong enough to lift a house, but often kept the weight at 405 pounds or less to focus on the muscles working. Bodybuilding glory didn't come immediately for Cutler. He placed 12th in his pro debut at the 1998 Night of Champions, but he came back to win it in 2000. He was 3rd at the 1999 Ironman Pro and 4th at that year's Arnold Classic, winning his first ASC in 2002 and taking the Ironman title a year later. In his Olympia debut in 1999, he was 14th, and just a year later, he was 8th. But when he hit his stride, very few could hold their own against this mass monster.
I grew up in Massachusetts, youngest of 7 kids, grew up on a farm. I grew up the youngest of 7 kids. I got 3 brothers, 3 sisters, and I started working at the age of 11. At age 11, I started doing that, but I was an active teenager. I actually didn't start training until I was 18 years old, but in high school, I played football. You marvel over like superheroes and you want to look like, Superman or whatever. So I was always intrigued by the muscle, and I hated my parents at the time. I hated my dad, I hated my brothers, because I was forced to get up before school, after school. I was doing chores on the farm. I really kind of hated them because I was kind of forced to work, even though they were kind of raising me in a sense. Any free time I had was spent working while the other kids were going on vacations and doing fun things, powerlifting competitions, and I would kill everybody in all the lifts, squat, deadlift. I mean, I benched 315 in high school. I didn't even know how to lift weights. In bodybuilding, although I didn't know anything about, joined the gym my 18th birthday, it was 1991, August 3rd, lifting weights. I kind of sat and watched and learned, and at the time it was just magazines. So I would pick up scrap magazines at the gym. No one really wanted to give me the advice, so I kind of watched how everyone did everything wrong. So I kind of overtrained, but at the same time my body still responded, because if I saw any leg equipment in there, I would do every leg machine, every chest machine, every shoulder machine. Chris Aceto, who's a big dietitian for a lot of the top guys, and he kind of took me under his wing and kind of wrote me out a diet, and I put it on my refrigerator and coaxed me into competing in a show. And the first time I got on stage, I was hooked, and I placed 2nd at my first show.
Number 6. Phil Heath. If there's one man whose name rings when one hears modern building, it is Phil Heath, winning the prestigious title of Mr. Olympia for 7 consecutive years from 2011 to 2017. With an impressive 5'9" height, 23-inch arm, 54-inch chest, and 29-inch waist, his physique is undeniably incredible. Heath is a natural-born athlete who played basketball on his high school's varsity team, after earning a prestigious athletic scholarship to the University of Denver. It was also during this time that he earned his nickname, The Gift, referring to his innate talent for all things sports and athletics, not to mention even as a college athlete. Phil's genetics for bodybuilding showed through. After graduating college in 2002, Heath was inspired to push his athleticism to even greater heights. He was immediately attracted to the intensity and competitiveness of professional bodybuilding and began pursuing a career as a professional in late 2002. He won his first NPC title in 2003 and began competing as an IFBB professional 2005. Looking at his impressive physique, one may think Phil works with heavy weights, but is it so? You'd be surprised. Unlike his bodybuilding counterparts, Phil does not emphasize lifting heavy weights. He instead focuses on lifting lighter weights with perfect form. It may surprise many, but Phil does not see the point in doing heavy T-bar rows, barbell rows, or deadlifts. His goal is to keep constant tension on the muscle he's training. A refreshing take on bodybuilding methodology, and it's done him a world of good. It's made him one of the best-known bodybuilders of all time. But his philosophy incorporates utmost intensity in his workouts. He utilizes high-volume sets, typically in the 10 to 12 rep range, but he is pushing some heavy weight. A job well done, since it's tied him in with the Austrian oak Arnold Schwarzenegger and the likes of Phil Heath. There is no doubt he has made a name for himself. Number 5. Dorian Yates. Serving as the bridge between Lee Haney's dominance of the 1980s and Ronnie Coleman's reign during the 2000s, six-time Mr. Olympia Dorian Yates is often singled out as the man who helped usher in the mass monster era of bodybuilding. Yates was an iconoclast. He created his own path within the sport using a unique training system that was eventually nicknamed Blood and Guts. This workout philosophy focused on using heavy weights to failure on just 1 or 2 working sets, with the intensity dialed up as far as it could go. For as long as he was training for bodybuilding competitions and until injuries halted his progress, the six-time Mr. Olympia, 1992-97, was in his dungeon gym in Birmingham, England, striving to beat his logbook. An adherent of high-intensity training, this hitman performed a minimum number of working sets, typically 1 per exercise, with maximum weights. Chronicled in a journal entry on March 1, 1985, at 22, when he weighed 230, he squatted 405 for 7, followed by 425 for 4. The former equates to a 486-pound squat for 1 rep. 2 days later, he benched 310 times 5, which equates to a 350-pound bench press for 1 rep. He would be approximately 50% stronger a decade later during his Olympia reign, when the squat and bench press were no longer included in his routines. Conversely, the deadlift wasn't in Yates's early training, but it was in his Olympia area workouts. However, he then deadlifted last in his back routines. Furthermore, he avoided lowering the bar all the way to the floor, thus minimizing quad and glute action and keeping more tension on his back. These factors make deadlifts considerably harder. In a 1996 video, we see him deadlifting 455 times 6 with straps, which equates to a 529-pound deadlift. But that was the final exercise in his back workout, which included 405-pound rows, and it was directly preceded by weighted hyperextensions, which pre-exhausted his spinal erectors. So we don't know how much Yates could have deadlifted powerlifting style under ideal conditions when at his strongest. With that history in mind, his latest contention that the risk-reward of heavy lifting or powerlifting training had little appeal to Yates is a major turn in his training philosophy. But it's not stopped the champ from leaving his mark on the world.
And I'm trying to achieve the best as I can as an athlete, and I'm not really interested in the glamour and the glitz. Bodybuilding from a different point of view from some of the other people that are involved in it. Maybe 3.5 hours a week in the gym of actual weight training. You know, not only have I got the genetics for the sport, I'm also training efficiently. I believe, you know, it's 100% a sport, and that's the way I look at it, and I'm an athlete.
Number 4. Larry Scott. The history of the Mr. Olympia contest is also a roster of bodybuilding legends, but only one man holds the distinction of winning the first Mr. Olympia. That man is Larry Scott. Scott won the inaugural Mr. Olympia contest in 1965 and helped legitimize its early years. He was also at the forefront of training and nutritional innovations that are still in use today. But how good was Scott? Schwarzenegger himself called him a great ambassador for the sport. Bodybuilding writer Rod Labby claimed that Scott set a physique standard for future generations, but that's not how it all began. Scott found himself excluded from contact sports at an early age due to his size. He entered the weight room for the first time in earnest at age 17 and spent 3 months lifting weights in the hope of improving his size and strength. His tenacity served him well in the first few months of failure. In 1959, Scott entered the Mr. Idaho bodybuilding contest, where he took first place despite some initial reservations. His first big break came in 1962 when he won the Mr. America title, and in 1964 the Mr. Universe title. In 1965, Joe and Ben Weider announced that their bodybuilding federation, the International Federation of Bodybuilding and Fitness, was introducing a new event, the Mr. Olympia competition. Held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York City, the first Olympia was an exciting moment in the sport, but also a very small affair. The crowd's jubilant welcome to Scott's appearance on stage led to the unanimous declaration that Scott was to be crowned the inaugural Mr. Olympia. Scott proved triumphant once again in 1966 and won the Olympia a second time, but also announced his retirement. Number 3, Sergio Oliva. He was the only man to have ever made Arnold Schwarzenegger psych out. What giant of a man must it take to make Arnold Schwarzenegger feel small? The only correct answer is Sergio Oliva, the black Cuban refugee who owned the Olympia from 1967 to 69 and remains one of bodybuilding's most revered veterans. By all accounts, Oliva was the sport's first mass monster, a beast of mythic proportions, hence the moniker The Myth, which included 22-inch arms and 30-inch thighs, separated by a minuscule 28-inch waistline. At 5'10" and a competitive weight between 225 and 245 pounds, Oliva invented the victory pose. Oliva began his training in Cuba as an Olympic-style weightlifter. In his first amateur competition, 21-year-old Sergio broke 3 Cuban records, 2 that were his own from the lifts before, in succession. From then, Sergio honed his technique in Russia with his clean, snatch and clean and jerk at 900 pounds when he arrived. The training proved a success, and Sergio was training at 1,300 pounds on his departure. In 1962, Oliva defected and wound up in Chicago, where his weightlifting background helped him in his bodybuilding debut. Once in the States, Sergio joined the IFBB in 1966, where he claimed IFBB Mr. World Tall Class and overall. This was just the beginning. Sergio took home IFBB Mr. Olympia in 1967, won it completely unopposed in 1968, and in 1969 beat his would-be arch-rival Arnold Schwarzenegger. After a fast exit from the IFBB in 1972, following a defeat to Schwarzenegger once again, Sergio went into the WBBG and won everything they had. After this success, he went into the WABBA Federation and had various victories. He made a comeback to the IFBB in 1984. However, after not fully preparing, Sergio placed only 8th in that year's Mr. Olympia and earned himself the nickname the 8th Wonder of the World. He placed same the next year before disappearing from the stage. Number 2, Samir Banout. Born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, Samir Banout, aka the Lion of Lebanon, began lifting weights at the age of 16 and earned his first trophy 2 years later as the youngest participant in the 1974 Teenage Mr. Universe competition. Soon after this initial stage experience, he moved to the US, where he earned his pro card by winning the light heavyweight class at the 1979 IFBB World Amateur Championships. For the next 2 decades, Samir participated in more than 50 competitions, including winning the 1983 Mr. Olympia contest in Munich, Germany. Renowned in particular for his incredibly developed lower back, which was immortalized as the Lebanese cedar, Samir was inducted into the IFBB Hall of Fame in 2002. Over the next 3 years, Samir appeared in 11 competitions, including 3 Mr. Olympia shows. He hadn't managed to win any by 1982, with 4th place being his best achievement. However, this all changed a year later. In 1983, the Lion of Lebanon had successfully won the most prestigious contest in the industry, becoming only the 6th bodybuilder to win the Mr. Olympia. For the next 13 years, Samir entered a further 38 shows, adding 3 more trophies and scoring highly in most of the contests. However, by 1996, at the age of 41, he decided to retire from the sport after earning a 6th place finish in the Masters Mr. Olympia that year. Samir left the sport as an icon, being remembered for his incredible lower back, which is often referred to as Lebanon cedar as a tribute. Number 1, Lee Haney. By mixing the monster muscle mass of today's bodybuilders with the symmetry and proportions of the golden era, Lee Haney built a physique that included the best of both worlds. This coveted combo is probably how he managed to win the title 8 times and become one of the most accomplished bodybuilders to ever grace the Mr. Olympia stage. Legend has it that he started playing bodybuilding after breaking his leg twice on the soccer field in high school. This was followed by a busy bodybuilding career. The Lee Haney's track record is particularly impressive. In 1979, he won one of his first competitions, the Teen Mr. America. 3 years later, he finished first in the Amateur World Championships, which allowed him to turn professional the following year in 1983. Nicknamed Total Lee Awesome, Lee Haney began to perform well. That same year, he took third place in the Mr. Olympia, an edition won by the Lebanese participant Samir Banout. Lee Haney's reign began in 1984. When he was only 24 years old, the American bodybuilder won his very first Mr. Olympia. He will win 7 others consecutively to bring his total to 8 victories between 1984 and 1991. At present, only the legendary Ronnie Coleman managed to match this performance but retired from the bodybuilding world in 1991 after his last victory against Dorian Yates, while he was still at the top of his art. That's all we have for you, folks. Thank you so much for watching our video today. Join us next time.